Okay, you guys ready to begin? Yeah. I know it's warm in here. We fixed the heater. It's better than sitting here in the cold. All right. Who? Evan, you come? And then, all right, guys, we're gonna start. So let's be encouraging for our participants. Yeah! Thank you. Super encouraging. Hold on one second. Let me take care of this. Okay, read all of this. Just out to this piece. From here to here. All right, everyone listen up.
Following Jesus in death and resurrection means our baptism becomes the overpowering event in our lives, the event which tells us who we are and how we are to live. In baptism we died, our turned in on our self-life was crucified and buried with Christ. We were raised with Christ to live as new human beings in a new order of existence. Daily we return to our baptism. Our turned in on self dies again and again. The new human being, the Christ self, is raised again to live in the new order of existence. As we die with Christ, we are raised with Christ in baptism, and as this death and resurrection event is renewed each day, the pattern of his life becomes the pattern of our lives, both our individual lives and our life together as the church. His no becomes our no, his yes becomes our yes.
Awesome. Good job. Okay. Who wants to remind me what we did the past 2 weeks? Okay, we can go home. What did we talk about last week? Ryan. Sorry? We talked about the garden and Adam and Eve. What did Adam and Eve do? There was another character in there too. Serpent. Serpent lied to them and said, you can eat from the thing that God told you not to. Yeah, the snake told them they could eat the fruit. It's okay. What did we talk about the week before? Yeah. The what? Women and men are equal. That's why God created Eve out of the side of Adam from a rib. We talked about the creation stories, the two different stories in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, where God created everything and everything God created was named good. Good. We talked about the what? We talked about the 10 Commandments?
Yeah, we did.
I remember that, but okay. So today, remember we're covering the entire Bible in 5 sessions. We're talking about, there's a lot. So the Bible's like this thick. There's a lot to it. So recognize, like, this is broad strokes. We are doing broad strokes. What does that mean? Like, we're not getting into all the details, we're just telling a bigger story. So creation, fall. Today we're going to talk about the people of Israel. Okay? So, buckle up, this is going to go very fast. But before we get into the people of Israel, I want to talk about how do we read our Bible. How do we read our Bible? All right, let me tell you a joke. There was a man who talked to the pastor after worship. And he said, Pastor, how am I supposed to read my Bible? And the pastor said, well, you take out the Bible, you put it on the table, open it up, you point to it, and then you read. So the man went home, opened his Bible, and he pointed to the verse, and the verse said, and Judas went and hung himself from a tree. And the man was like, no way. So we went back to the pastor, he says, so I went home and I did what you told me, and I pointed to the verse, and it says, Judas hung himself from a tree, and I didn't like that. So do you have any other advice? The pastor said, yeah, go home, set the Bible on the table, open it up, and point to another verse. And he did, and it says, go and do likewise. And he says, oh, I got to talk to the pastor about this. He goes back to the pastor, and he gave him his Bible back, and he says, I don't like how you read Scripture. What's the point of that? Say it louder. We don't read it randomly, right? Don't read it literally. Excellent. Pastor Eric likes to tell people that we don't read our Bibles literally because in Scripture it says lots of things, right? Okay. If we read our Bibles literally, remember when we talked about creation? The fourth day of creation was God creating the first 24-hour day. So what happened in the first 3 days? Right? These are mysteries we're supposed to ponder, not things we try and fill out in an exam. Pastor Meredith tells the story. Scripture says, if your left hand causes your right hand to sin, then cut your hand off. And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. And so she says, if we read our Bibles literally, there'd be a bunch of people in our churches with one arm or one hand and one eye. So we don't read our Bibles literally. We read them as story. Last time we talked about them being library. And sometimes there's history books, and sometimes there's narrative and stories, and sometimes there's songs. So we don't read songs like history. And we don't read narratives, or we don't read history like narratives. Also, we do not read our Bible alone. We don't hand you a Bible and say, here, read this. Good luck. Why is that important? Because the Bible is complex, it's complicated, it has nuances that we can't explain. All right, here's your homework for next week. Download the Bible app onto your phone and pick something to read. So the great thing about the Bible app is it has devotionals. Say, I want to read the different Psalms for 7 days. And it's right there on your phone. Each day you read something different. And the thing I love about my Bible app is that it reads to me. Like I don't have to read the words, it actually just like an audiobook. Make sense? Okay, because I'm going to ask you what you read next week. Everybody understand? So what's our assignment for next week? Read something from Scripture. Okay. Oftentimes when people ask me, where should I start reading? I say, open the Psalms. That's Psalms. They are each individual psalm, singular, but there's 150 of them. So they're the book of Psalms. Pick one. In the Psalms, there's high emotion. There's anger, there's sadness, there's joy, there's celebration, there's dancing. Right? Good place to start. And the best part about the Psalms, outside of 119, is that they are very short. Yeah, see, you're speaking about that's short. There's a lot to them. Okay. Or pick the gospel. Gospel is a story, it's a narrative that tells the story of Jesus. In church, we're reading the book of the Gospel of Mark. Very fast-paced, kind of graphic novel. Just things unfolding. Okay, we clear? So how we read our Bible is maybe not as important as why do we read our Bible? Why would we read Scripture? What did somebody say? To learn. Good. What did you say?
Mason said to learn. I did not say that.
You said the same thing?
No, Mason said to learn. No, I did not. I just said Sam.
They all agree. Well, see, more than one person agrees, and it's wisdom, right? So part of why we read our Bible is to learn about God and who God is, but also who we are and how our identity is formed. So when we look at the scripture of Israel, remember we ended in chapter 3 of Genesis last week. In later parts of Genesis, God calls, before I get there are 6 parts of this story. God establishes a covenant with Abraham and Sarah. Then Egypt happens, where they are oppressed and put into slavery. God leads them out of slavery into freedom through Exodus. Then they are given a promised land. Then they break the covenant and want to be like everybody else, so they ask for a king. Things don't turn out so well. Babylon invades, takes them away. Short story. That's thousands of years of history. Okay, so let's start with Abraham and Sarah. What I want you to know is that anytime there is a name change in Scripture, in the Bible, we're supposed to pay attention. Something important is going to happen. It's like the author saying, this is important, pay attention. So why did Abraham and Sarah's name change? Because God changed their life. That Abraham and Sarah were told they would never have children. And God says, I promise you that when I bless you, you will have more descendants on earth than sands on the beaches. They weren't able to have children. How's this going to happen? So Abram and Sarai became Abraham and Sarah, and they had Isaac. And Isaac, his name means laughter. We're laughing at God, because when God said to Sarah, you're going to have children, she laughed at God. So she celebrated that by naming Isaac, God laughs. When Abraham and Sarah had Isaac, Isaac had twins called Jacob and Esau. Have you guys heard this story? What is it about? Oh, it's okay. So Jacob and Esau were twins, and the firstborn child in those days were given the inheritance. So it would be like your parents saying, you get all of the stuff. Your brothers and sisters get nothing, but you get all of the stuff. Pretty cool, huh? Well, Jacob steals Esau's blessing because Esau was born first. He grabs that in a very interesting story. He steals the birthright, and then Jacob has 12 children. They are named the tribes of Israel. So the 12 tribes of Israel are from Jacob. That's how we get the people of Israel, the nation that is born of Israel. One of those children's name is Joseph. Anybody ever hear of a play called Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat? Guess what it's about? Joseph. Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. Guess who didn't like that? His brothers. Anybody know what his brothers tried to do to him? They tried to kill him. And instead of killing them, they did what? Sold him into slavery. Where did he end up? In Egypt. The most powerful nation in the world at that time. Joseph was the right-hand man of Pharaoh, who was the most powerful man in the world. And because he was able to interpret dreams, Joseph saved Egypt from a famine, including all of his brothers coming back to Egypt to get food because no one else in the world had it, and he was distributing. He sees his brothers come, And he's like, oh, they don't even recognize me. And there's this powerful verse for every family to read. He says to them, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. So, fast forward, Joseph and the Hebrew people live in the land of Egypt. A couple pharaohs down the road, they forget who Joseph was. The Hebrew people become a nuisance to the Pharaoh and the people in Egypt. They are scared that they're being outnumbered. So Pharaoh makes them slaves. Guess who probably built the pyramids? Hebrews. You with me? Story making sense so far? So, when they are in Egypt and in slavery, that's not working. So Pharaoh says, let's kill the firstborn child of every Hebrew woman. Man. A guy named Moses, you ever heard of him? Yeah. He was put in a basket, sent down the river because his mother wanted to save his life. Who picks up the basket? Pharaoh's daughter. Guess who now is in the Pharaoh's palace? Is Moses. The guy who says, God says to, I need you to lead all of my people out of slavery. And he does. Real cool story about burning bush in there somewhere. So, now we are in Egypt, and we are trying to get out of slavery. Anybody ever seen any depiction of the Ten Commandments? Movie, TV, Disney animation? Yeah? Oh yeah, I know that you mentioned it. All of those are terrible compared to the actual story in Scripture. So there are 10 plagues. God performs these miracles to help the people know He's going to give them a promised land. So in Exodus, we get the 10 Commandments that we promised to teach you. Exodus is a story about God providing in that wilderness. Because guess what? When they leave Egypt, they're in the desert. There's no food. There's no water. And people complain to Moses. Moses says, God, why have you given me these complaining people? And then here's water, here's food. Has anybody ever heard of manna? You don't know what I mean? Manna is the bread that God promised each day for them to come down from heaven. And they picked it up, they ate it, and they couldn't keep it because it went back. Now, does anybody know what the word manna means? Okay, if you win in Jeopardy, I want some credit. Manna means, what is this? Because when they got it, they didn't know what it was. That's what it means. What is it? That's my definition. That's what it means. If you have a phone, Google, what does manna mean? And see if I'm wrong. M-A-N-N-A. I'll wait for the answer. All right, so the whole purpose of Exodus is to help people know that God provides in your life and that God will liberate you from anything that holds you back. They get to the promised land. Yes? An unexpected... What does it say?
It means tomorrow.
It's to mow? To moan? Tomorrow. All right, now Google manna plus Hebrew meaning. Maybe I need to call Google. Trust me, it means, what is it?
An expression of surprise.
Unexpected surprise. Or if something was given to you as a gift and you didn't know what it was, you might ask, what is it? Unexpected gift? Cool. All right. So, the promised land was given to these people, and the guy who was supposed to lead them there, Moses, doesn't get to get in. He dies right before they cross his way. Joshua takes over the leadership, and it is in the promised land that they say, God, just give us a king because we want to be like everybody else. Then maybe remember what happened when they were talking to the serpent, and the serpent said, go ahead and eat of it. You can be like who? God. The people of God are having an identity crisis. They don't know if they want to be like God or if they want to be like everybody else. Why is asking for a king problematic? Why is that a difficult thing? What do kings do? That's good. So in any example of a king, the king takes more for themselves than gives to the people. So God is probably wondering, why do you want to be like everybody else? I didn't want you to be like everybody else. I made you unique. You're special. So, does anybody know how many kings there were in the time of Israel, the nation of Israel? So there was, Judah was in the north, Israel was in the south. They were a divided kingdom. What did you say? Just guess a number. More than that. 40, yes, good job. There were 40 kings. Nobody, I was getting to the point. Okay, now guess, how many of those 40 kings did very well in God's eyes?
0.
Did you say 2? 0? 0 is close. It was more than that.
2.
Double that.
4.
4 out of 40. Now, who likes baseball? Yeah, you like baseball? If you were, as a batter, went 4 for 40 for the Brewers, would you stay in the major leagues? No, he was really bad, right? So for batting average, having a king was not good. Now, there was this guy named King Ahab. He was the 7th king of Israel. He fell in love with a woman named Jezebel, and Jezebel was a Baal worshiper. That's a different god's name. Sometimes you say Baal or Baal. And because he fell in love with this woman who was a different god worshiper, he broke the covenant that God had made with Abraham and Sarah to say, I will bless you and you will be blessing to everybody. In that broken covenant, we get the time of prophets. Does anybody know what a prophet does? They what? Go ahead, please. Ryan? Whoever said it.
Tells the future.
No. Prophecy would be like fortune telling. That's sometimes how we use it in American culture. Emily? Yeah, they are God's messengers. So they often tell God's people the truth. And God was telling King Ahab, you in this relationship are bad news. And because of that, bad things are going to happen. Now, remember when we talked about the first 2 acts, creation, fall, and then God restores it. God creates, we mess it up, God fixes it. It's kind of like a whole pattern. That's what happens to the people of God. It's a whole pattern. God gives them all of these things, they mess it up, God recreates it. Prophets come and say, knock it off, get your lives together. They don't do it, consequences happen. Anybody here in this room been grounded? Okay. I don't care how many times. As parents, we ground children because of consequences, right? I think that's right. Is that right? You need a prophet in your life. She said her kids are perfect. So consequences are like when we talked about what happened in the fall, what were women told the consequences of sin and eating of that fruit was going to happen? You remember the consequences? Pain in childbirth. And for the men? Yeah, you have to go out in the sun and work all the things on your life and grow food. And for the serpent? It would be the least desirable of all animals and have no legs and have to scurry on the ground. So for the consequences of the people of God, they had what we refer to as the exile. 586 BCE. You guys know what BCE means? Before the Common Era. Nope. Before the Common Era. So, and that is 0 is the year they tried to make Jesus' birth happen. They were off by 4 years, but it was okay. Yeah. I mean, making up a calendar and being 4 years off is not hard. I mean, that's pretty good for the time that they had it. Hello and welcome. So, we call this Babylonian captivity. The most powerful nation in the world at that time was Babylon. Babylon came in and destroyed Israel and Judah and Jerusalem, and they took all the people and took them to Babylon. So there was no history of God's people in that land for a couple of years. And in Psalm 137, we hear the words, "We sat down by the rivers of Babylon and we wept for our nation was gone." So, in that time of exile, the people are waiting for something. It's often a title we give to Jesus. They are waiting for starts with an M. A what? I couldn't hear you.
Miracle.
Close. I mean, that's a good one. Jesus' birth was a miracle, so I'll give you credit. You have credit. Say it louder. Yes, they're waiting for a Messiah. Good job. Because all the ways that God kept creating and restoring and creating and restoring have not worked. You wanted a king, I gave you a king that didn't work out. So now you need a Messiah to save you. So next week we will talk about the 4th act of the Bible, which is one word. His name is, starts with a J. Jesus.
I said Jesus.
I didn't hear you. That's okay. Okay. So, what? Okay. Rita, you were not here last week. We talked to 8th graders about a object for confirmation. So I'm going to come in and join you, and we'll talk about that.